Hey folks, I'm Pete and this is Pete's Eats Cooking Videos. Today I'm doing something long overdue. So many people have been asking me for pierogies. So I'm making pierogies. We'll make them together. Now, there are a number of steps to making pierogies. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide this video up into 5 sections. So making the dough, the filling, forming the pierogies, boiling them, and then the toppings. And so each of those sections, you can always look in the bottom bar below to figure out where the timing is if you want to skip over and go to one of those sections in particular. So I'm ready, hopefully you're ready. Let's begin. So here's what you're going to need to make the dough. You're going to need flour. Now all-purpose flour is good. Actually, bread flour is really good as well. It's got a lot of gluten in it, but don't use pastry flour for this. You're going to need eggs, a little bit of sunflower oil, salt, and water, and that's it. So to start, this is my basic recipe, and I have 4 cups of flour in the bowl, and a good heaping teaspoon of salt. Of course, you can up the ingredients or halve them if you want, depending on how many pierogies you're up to making. So there you go. So there's the 4 cups of flour and the 1 teaspoon of salt. And now I'm going to add to that, I'm going to add 4 egg yolks. Just the yolks. So sort of 1 yolk for each cup of flour. Now no one's going to throw you in jail here if you get some white in there. It's not critical. As a matter of fact, I actually like having a little bit of the white in there as well. There's 4. So to that, I'm going to add about a good tablespoon of sunflower oil. That really helps out. That's a good tablespoon, maybe even 2 of sunflower oil. And then also a good cup of water. So a cup and a bit of water. Again, the water you might have to increase or possibly even decrease depending on the humidity and everything else. And then I'll mix this up, and I want to mix it up and I want to get like a stiff-ish dough for sure. I don't want a really soft dough. I want it definitely on the stiff side. I've got it out on the counter now, and so now I'm going to just knead it into a ball. You see, it definitely is on the dry side, but I think there is enough moisture. If need be, I could add a little bit, but I think I'm okay. Now once we're done, we're going to put this in the fridge, and you might think it's too dry, but it's definitely going to soften up. We'll leave it for about an hour and you'll see how nice and soft it gets. Of course, I move it around to get all those little pieces. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to put it in the fridge and let it relax for 1 hour, and then we'll be ready to go. In the meantime, we'll get it started on the filling. So now the fillings. We're going to make potato and cheese pierogies today, and so what you're going to need for that is potatoes. I like using russets because they mash up really nicely. A little bit of onion, a little bit of cheese. I like using either cheddar or marbled cheddar, some butter and salt and pepper. Also today, really easy fillings that I'm going to make as well are the raspberry and cherry fillings, where you just put the berries in and a little bit of sugar and that's it. And I'll show you that in the forming section. So let's get going on these potato-filled pierogies. Let's begin. Now that we're ready to start with the potato filling, I've cleaned them and cut them up into chunks, salted the water, and now I'm going to boil them until they're ready to have a nice smooth mash. So while the potatoes are boiling, you also need some onions. Now you want to chop up these onions to a mince so they're really small. And I'm going to fry them up until they're almost brown. You definitely want them further than transparent. You want them almost brown. I've also salted the onions, and I'm going to fry them in butter. These onions are nicely softened now, and I would use about 1 medium onion for about every 4 potatoes. Of course, it all depends on your taste. The potatoes are nicely softened. I'm going to mash them in a second, but first I'm going to add the onions, add those in. And I'm also going to add a little bit of pepper. Again, it's all to taste. There's a little bit of pepper to get some nice flavor. And I'm also going to add some cheese. And I would say sort of a handful of cheese, grated. for each, again, 4 or 5 potatoes. So there's 2 for my amount. And now I'm going to mash them. Oh yeah, they're nice. They're all ready. This is now mashed up really nicely, no big clumps of potatoes. And we're going to let this cool right down to room temperature. So now I'm going to roll out the dough. I'm going to roll it out so it's about 1/8 of an inch thick. And away I go. It's now rested. The dough is rested for a good hour. And I have this rolling pin. I like it. It's a French rolling pin. And I'm going to roll it out. See how nicely it works out now? So now that I'm almost there, I definitely want to get rid of all this excess flour. I don't want excess flour on the dough, both the top and the bottom. So I'm going to get rid of all this excess flour and do my final rollout. Okay, I think we're ready to start forming them. So here's the cherry pierogies. We have the sour pitted cherries that have been draining for a good half hour. I want to get as much liquid out of them as possible. And so I'm going to cut a circle. You know, everyone that makes pierogies has their own favorite cup. I lost mine, so I'm going to try this one and see if it's any good. So there you go. It doesn't have to be a perfect circle because you're going to form it with your fingers as well. And there you go. So there it is. So now what I want to do is I want to take a couple of cherries, usually 2. I think I can squeeze another one in there, so a third. There we go. There's a third, okay. And now I'm going to put a little bit of sugar in there as well. So a touch of sugar. There you go, just a bit of sugar. Now what's really important with these is not to get the seam wet. I want to get the seam perfectly dry so there's no liquid cherry juice kind of in there, okay? And I think I've done it. So now I've crimped down on the seam. You want to crimp down really nice and hard to make sure that's a really good seam. Yes, I think I've done it. And I didn't get any leakage. I'm going to double, triple check that. And there you go. That's going to be delicious. Okay, so let's make a raspberry one. So I've got a nice circle there. And now I'm going to grab a couple raspberries. These are nice big raspberries, so I only need 2 for sure. A little bit of sugar. And now close it up. And the main thing is you have to keep the seam free of any kind of raspberry juice or hopefully sugar as well. But anyway, do your best to crimp it up. If the dough starts sticking to your finger, just put some flour on your fingers and that'll prevent the dough from sticking to your finger. And this one's looking really nice. Flip it over, make absolutely sure. And there you go. That's a beautiful, beautiful pierogi filled with raspberries and sugar, and it's going to be absolutely delicious. Okay, let's do the potato ones. Cut out a nice round. Okay, I've got a good teaspoonful of filling, potato cheese filling inside the dough, and I'm just going to fold the dough over. You can stretch it, of course, and then just crimp the edges. If it's sticking to your finger, you can just put flour on your fingers and that'll prevent it from sticking. And I think the potato ones are the most forgiving in terms of, you know, if you get a little bit of potato dough in between the crimp, it's not really going to be a problem. Whereas with the berry ones, it's a huge problem. They tend to open. So there you go. I think that's crimped up nicely. And now we can put it on the tray with a floured tea cloth and wait till we finish them all up before we boil them. So here's a bunch of them made. These are the berry ones, and we put them on the floured tea cloth. We're going to cover them up. Notice this one here, it's leaking there, and we'll give it a try. We'll boil it up, but you do have to be careful because the odd one will leak. I put the water on to boil, to cook them now, and it's come to a nice boil. So I'm going to add the pierogies. I'm doing the potato ones. And in a nice sized pot like this, I can probably put about 1.5 to 2 dozen. And the main thing is to put them in, have them boil for about 5 minutes until they float up nicely to the top. I want to make sure they don't stick to the bottom. So I've got a wooden spoon here, and I'll just move them around a bit to make sure they don't stick to the bottom. So it's been about 5 minutes. So what I want to do now is take them out. They're floating nicely on top, and I'm going to put them on a tray, a buttered tray. So there. And I don't want them on top of each other, so they're just nicely separated. So we'll let those kind of cool on the buttered tray, and I'll add some more into the boiling water. So we'll turn them now to make sure the other side gets some butter on them as well. Okay, so now for the toppings, or as we say, schwarke. We use fried onions, fried bacon, butter, salt, and just a little bit of oil to start off with so the onions don't burn. So I'll show you how to do that right now. So now for the topping, I'm going to put in, you don't want to be shy on the butter because it's like the sauce. So about a cup of butter, and I'm going to put just a little bit, probably about a quarter cup, not even an eighth of a cup of sunflower oil, just so that the onions don't burn. And I'm going to get those going, and I'm going to fry them until they're almost brown. Put a little bit of salt, probably about a tablespoon of salt in there. Not too much because we do have the bacon. So in a separate pan, I fry the bacon. So for the topping, I also fry bacon, and I've cut these like horizontally into little strips right through the pack. And that's one full pack of bacon. And I'm going to fry this up till it's almost done. I'm going to drain the fat and put it into the onions. I don't like adding all that bacon fat into the topping. So what I do now, the bacon is almost done. I move all the bacon, and I'm going to drain all of that fat. I'm going to take all that bacon fat out. So you can see that the onions are just nicely starting to brown. And I put the bacon in. I'll fry them up together just for a bit. And that'll be it. You'll see this is going to be an absolutely fabulous topping. So here they are, all finished up with the onion and bacon topping. I like a little bit of sour cream on the side, and they're going to be fabulous. Enjoy!